recording, folks, so we'll make the video available afterwards for those of you who need to go through it slower and understand a little better. Okay, good. So this should make sense to you. Cancer, in essence, is about cell errors that get perpetuated. In other words, I'm sitting here in front of a window right now so I can have great light and look good, but as the sun hits my face, my cells may be making mistakes as they divide and make their daughters. And they're making those mistakes because the sun is what we call a mutagen. It causes cell errors. So as these cells are making mistakes, anything that promotes the rate of those mistakes, for example, a sunscreen that contains mutagens in it or makeup that contains chemicals in it, will promote that rate of cell growth and therefore drive cancer growth. And it's the same thing with inflammation. So in that way, I hope we can understand that stress, any kind of stress, is a contributor. I'm hearing from my IT, Rebecca and Christina, that the chat function is not enabled for the group. So
I'll take a peek at it.
Okay, great. Thank you. If anybody, I was wondering, why do we not see any questions here? Okay, good.
It's chat's disabled is what it says.
Okay. Is that better?
Can everybody see what I'm typing here? So can you let go of my cursor, Kasim? So can everybody see?
It's working now. It's working now.
Okay, perfect.
Great. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so it sounds like I barreled through and people might have had questions. So while you're taking just a minute to type in your questions, and they don't need to be spelled perfectly and they can be abbreviated, and I don't need to see your name if you don't want to share it, I'm going to talk a little bit about supplements. So supplements are things that they're natural therapies. So they're herbs, they can be botanicals, they can be nutraceuticals, which are food-based therapies, they can be medical nutrition. All of those things are not well regulated by the US government. So they're regulated under the USDA and not the FDA. So part of the reason why you're an oncologist and why in oncology itself, it's hard to get your oncologist or your team to understand why you need natural therapies is because they're concerned about quality of supplements. So the USDA is the US Department of Agriculture, and it regulates, for example, your vitamin D supplement like it would a banana. Whereas the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, is regulating aspirin under different guidelines. So the USDA is looking to make sure it's not contaminated with some sort of poison or toxin that might, I'm not going to spell poison right, so I'm just not going to write it, some sort of poison or toxin that may harm you. Whereas the FDA is looking at source, contamination, dose, and most importantly, efficacy. So efficacy is, does it work? Okay? And supplements are not regulated this way by the US government. So what does that mean for all of us? What that means is when we're choosing supplements, we may not know how to make those choices. So what you buy over the counter, what it says on the bottle may not be what's in the bottle. What's in the bottle may be contaminated. It may have problems with source. It may not work. And worse, a lot of companies like, for example, Pure Formulas, VitaCost, Amazon are selling supplements that are either placebos or are using brand logos that are not the company itself. So for example, Pure Formulas is a website that is using the branding of a pharmaceutical grade product called Pure Encapsulations, but Pure Formulas is a large sort of low-cost dispensary out of South America that has bought these supplements, either expired or not tested, and has bought the labels at times and sells them as the supplement itself. But their logo resembles the logo of Pure Encapsulations. The supplement industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, so it's very hard for you as a cancer patient because you're vulnerable. You're looking for things that you know might work, but you don't know how to assess those things. So I want to make sure that we understand a couple things when we're talking about supplements. One, I don't like my patients buying supplements over the counter unless they're safe. And if they are safe, I'll let you know that they are. If you are going to get supplements, I prefer that our patients use my NPI so that they can access pharmaceutical grade supplements, and we make them available through BeWellWithAIM.com. You need a password to use that website because it's restricted to our patients. So we'll talk about later how to access that. And we'll talk about ways to evaluate supplements if people have questions. But there's 3 supplements that I want to discuss that have to do with stress and that help you to fight stress. Any questions so far? Just keep typing them in as they come up. So the 3 supplements I want to highlight are B12, ashwagandha, and ginseng. And I chose these 3 because they're all 3 stress fighters. So when we're talking about stress, B12, not B, swear word, B12, ashwagandha, and ginseng. Okay? So I'm going to start with B12. B12 is pretty much safe over the counter. So it's not one that we have to worry about source with. It's something that you can get from Meijer, CVS, Whole Foods. Quality is not really an issue with B12. The problem with B12 is it's usually sold as a B complex. And a B complex is a no for most cancer patients. And the reason why is B12 is linked with other B vitamins and sold as a complex because the supplement industry isn't thinking about targeting a specific group of people. So in the case of a B complex, you might be getting, for example, folic acid, or you might, for example, be getting iron. And those things do one thing alone, and that is they promote cell growth. So circling back all the way to the beginning, we want to avoid promoting cell growth when we're fighting cancer. So it's really important that when we're using B12, we use it as a single agent, not in a complex. Okay? The other piece about B12 is it's poorly absorbed by 40% of the population because it has to be what's called methylated. Methylated means it has to be in a specific form for you to be able to absorb it, because a lot of people lack the enzymes to be able to convert B12 into a usable form. Another problem with B12 is that it gets absorbed in the stomach and in a part of the small intestine. So if we don't have good acid production in the stomach, and we don't have good absorption in the small intestine, then we can have trouble absorbing B12. Curiously, almost 40% of people who struggle with depression are B12 deficient and are poor absorbers. So it's really important when we're talking about stress to make sure we get our B12 levels up above a 600. Okay? So the next supplement that I want to highlight here is ashwagandha. Okay. Ashwagandha is an Indian and North African herb. And you may have heard of it as withania or Indian ginseng, some things like that. I don't know how many of you have ever used the website or service pubmed.gov. This is where the government is publishing all clinical data done anytime, anywhere in the world on any substance. So if I wanted to look at ashwagandha and how it fights cancer, for example, I can, let me see how I can go to Chrome here. I can put ashwagandha into pubmed.gov and I can write ashwagandha. Ashwagandha and cancer. And I'll see that 254 studies will come up looking at how ashwagandha works to fight cancer in an integrative way. The problem with a lot of this data, folks, is a lot of it is cell data or animal data. And we don't, in the oncology world, use cell data or animal data in clinical care. But if you click over here on clinical trial, it'll filter that data and pull up just the trial data itself. And you'll see that ashwagandha did indeed in trial show increase in quality of life, including decrease in fatigue. Why does that matter? It matters because of how we're using it. It matters because when we're talking about evidence-based care, we want to make sure we're choosing supplements that not only are in the right form, for example, methylated B12, that are not combined with other nutrients, for example, single agent B12, that are sourced properly. So if we're getting an herb out of India, we want to make sure it's clean. A lot of herbs that are coming out of India are cleaned with a 1,2-dichloroethane, which causes cancer. So only a few supplement companies will test for that solvent. So we want to make sure we're relying on companies that do. And most importantly, we want to make sure it's efficacious, that it works. So ashwagandha has excellent data on stress. If I had just put in stress and not cancer, I would have seen a ton of data about stress and ashwagandha. But if I also see data on ashwagandha and fatigue, even better, right? Although I'm not using this herb in this case for fatigue, I'm using it for stress. Any questions so far? So I see our biotin, bee pollen, niacinamide, good sources of B12. So good question. So biotin, niacinamide are types of B vitamins, and they're not good sources of B12. Bee pollen is also not a great source of B12. However, unfortunately, eggs, meat, poultry, those kinds of things are good sources of B12. And the problem for many of us is we might have some restrictions in terms of how we're fighting cancer with nutrition. So usually B12 needs to be supplemented. And if you're worried about natural sources, don't with B12. B12 is safe. If you're worried about dyes, preservatives, colors, fillers, then I would use pure encapsulations because they screen for all of that. Yes, they were bought by Nestle several years ago, but we've been monitoring them for quality, and so far they haven't changed their formulations. Okay, good question. So moving on from ashwagandha. Oh, and the other thing I want to talk about with ashwagandha is it doesn't have interactions. So the beautiful thing about ashwagandha is it doesn't interact heavily with chemotherapy radiation. So one of the most important things to your oncologist is that you're not taking natural therapies that will compete with your current conventional treatment or that will potentiate, meaning increase the risk of side effects from that treatment. So the field that looks at how nutrition, natural therapies, chemotherapy, radiation interact is what field? It's ours. So you need an integrative oncologist who has a doctoral degree in the pharmacokinetics, meaning the combination of how those things work together to know if there's an interaction. Your local pharmacist can only look in a book, and the information is really limited in those cases, or they can put it on a website called Drug Herb or Drug Interaction. And again, that information is really limited, and your oncologist does not know the answers to those questions. But ashwagandha is a beautiful herb because it doesn't have a lot of interactions. However, the third herb that the third natural therapy that I want to highlight, which is ginseng, is excellent for stress, but has a ton of interactions. So ginseng is one of those herbs that you just see everywhere. You see it in male potency formulas, you see it in fatigue formulas, you see it in everywhere from CVS to Whole Foods. It's used widely throughout the world. And it is also a Chinese or an Asian herb. And it has a ton of data. So if we go back to pubmed.gov, do you guys remember what we were just looking at? Ashwagandha. And I just put in ginseng. And I'm just going to show you just ginseng. I'm not going to specify with cancer. I'm just going to put in ginseng itself. You're going to see 10,000 results on ginseng used in every field of medicine and how it works, right? But if I put in ginseng in cancer, I'm still going to see a large amount of results here. As you can see, 1,300 results looking at ginseng in cancer treatment. And if I specify clinical trial data, I'll still see a significant amount of data. Now, 33 results may seem like a small amount, but it's not for natural therapies. This means 33 clinical trials conducted in a hospital setting looking at cancer, usually double-blinded, randomized controlled trials, looking at cancer and how it responds to an herb combined with a drug or the drug alone. And that's really good data. Of course, it depends where the study was and the quality of the study, and we can talk about that in another talk. What's important to note is how much data there is on ginseng for cancer-related fatigue. But if I put in ginseng and stress, I'm going to see a ton of more data. Excuse me, my computer keeps moving because I have it propped up just so on some books so you guys can see me really clearly. So with ginseng and stress, I still see a ton of data on how this herb lowers stress in any population, in people in general. So what's the problem? Why can't we all take it? The problem is it uses the same doorway in the body as a lot of our cancer drugs use. And that doorway is called CYP3A4. It doesn't mean that you can't use it at all. It means you have to use it in a very specific way. So part of understanding how to use it is understanding the half-life of your drugs. For example, if you're taking a taxane drug, you might have a half-life of, the drug might be in your body, in other words, for 24 hours. If you're taking another type of drug, let's say a platinum, the drug might be in your body for only 6 hours. So when we're dosing ginseng, we'd want to be dosing it away from or around those windows. Now, if we're on a continuous drug like tamoxifen, then we're up poop creek. Just kidding. If we're doing something like tamoxifen, then we change the dose. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful in understanding that it's not super straightforward to just buy some pills over the counter and take them with your cancer treatment. You really need to be partnered with someone who can help you navigate that. But you also don't want to miss out on taking these things because the data is so robust. And it hurts me, it hurts my heart that in oncology care, this isn't standard of care yet. Because if we were in Europe or we were in Asia, it would be better integrated and it would be standard of care. So, a couple things. I'm just looking over here in the chat box. I want to just uh, bring everybody's attention. Normally, when we do these talks, we hand out white slips and we have you fill them out. On the right here in the chat box, you're going to see a form you're going to fill out online. It's just going to you're just going to put your email address on it and let me know if you want me to contact you and let you know where we're speaking again. It's never at a cost to you, and we never sell or use your information in other ways. If you do have questions and you want us to call you, then you can just let us know on that little form. I would like everybody to fill that out because it's really hard being on this computer, sitting in my bedroom, looking at this sort of blank light and not knowing who I'm talking to and how I can truly be useful to you. So I want to make sure that I personalize this and I'm able to reach out to all of you either through email or let you know where we're speaking next. Okay? So we're going to post that a couple times in case you guys miss it. And we'll ask Christina or Rebecca to send it out to the email list of the people who registered for this talk. Would that be okay, Rebecca?
Definitely. I will do that after we're done.
Awesome. So I see here a question on, do you have any information on what exercise in conjunction with good food habits would help fight cancer? I'm a 2-time survivor. Yes. So first of all, congratulations on surviving and thriving. I want to emphasize that exercise and nutrition are both keys in lowering our stress level and fighting cancer. But if I could be so bold, what I'd like to do is actually turn it over to Jessica first. I'm going to make a note to myself about that question, and I'm going to answer it in the Q&A because it basically is a topic in and of itself, and I don't want to lose track of time
Right.
and just keep going on and on about it.
Well, yeah, and can you hear me right now?
I can. Thank you.
Okay,
Rob.
yeah, it's not meant to cause any kind of issues. It's just that's one of the things I'm really curious about. Going through what I went through, and I came out not walking and talking, but I had a goal when I was at the U of M hospital that I was going to do a half Ironman. Oh, I was going to do an Iron. I was going to do a try first, and my friend was there, and he said he would do it with me. But anyways, so.
Rob, have you seen this season of Survivor?
I know Survivor.
Okay, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, it's a television show on CBS, and there's a contestant on this last season, Ethan, who is a B-cell lymphoma survivor, who also is a triathlete and a marathon runner. It's an incredible season, but on the 4th episode, he really talks about how he survived and how he used his mind over matter. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. But I'm gonna address your question. I think it's an important one, and it would be useful if we did a topic just on that. But I'll come back.
All right.
I'll come back to it and at least give you some highlights in terms of where the evidence is in terms of what works. Okay,
and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I just kind of want to know that what I'm doing is actually right, but I am.
Awesome.
Making it, so that's all.
Awesome. So I'm going to give you like I said, I'm going to give you where the evidence is in terms of what we all can be doing that shows conclusively we lower risk of recurrence. I'm going to
my one other thing too, and this is just a funny thing, is I'm a father of 4 boys, and stress is all the time. It's like, I left the hospital and the doctor told me, don't let it be loud. Don't let it be and it never did. And so,
And we can hear all that noise in your background.
well, yeah,
I'm gonna mute you and let
yeah.
Jessica pick up there on what we can do to manage our home lives. Okay.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Just checking to see if we have any other questions I missed. Nope. Okay. So we'll keep reposting that form for people to fill out. Rebecca will send it out at the end. And I'm going to turn it over now to Jessica. I want to remind you guys before I do on how to find us. So you can go for both of us. Let go of my cursor, please. Thank you. Go to aimnatural.com, or you can call us at 248-798-2942. And to get supplements that are safe, evidence-based, and cost-effective, be well with AIM. Although you will need a password, so just fill out that form or contact me and I'll help you with that. Okay? Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Jessica. Jessica, you should be able to share your screen if you need to, but let Rebecca know if you can't. And Rob, thank you for that question. I'm going to come back to it.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Roy, for sharing your wisdom, your expertise with us. It's always so informative and inspiring to listen to you speak. So I just hope I can keep our viewers half as engaged as I feel now listening to you. But I would also like to thank Gilda's Club for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share my knowledge and my experience and hopefully share some coping strategies with you all that can help us deal with some of the stress that we're all feeling right now.
You know what, Jessica, I forgot to say one thing, and that is when Jessica is talking, she's not going to be able to see the chat and the questions that are coming up for you guys, but I will. So just keep chatting while she's talking, and when we circle back, I'll feed the questions to her during the Q&A. So write them down as we go in the chat box, and we'll just keep we'll post them at the end and talk about the answers at the end if she can't read them as she's going. Okay?
Yes, thank you so much. I don't want anyone to feel like I'm not listening to their questions or not answering them. We'll definitely leave quite a bit of time at the end for that Q&A. But before I really dive in today, I want to take a moment to introduce myself and kind of let you all become a little familiar with the work that I do. I know Christina did a lovely job of introducing us at the beginning, but just in case anyone missed that moment or anything, like Christina said, my name is Jessica. I'm a master's level mental health counselor, and I work very closely with Dr. Roy and Dr. March at Associates of Integrative Medicine. I do specialize in the treatment of anxiety, depression, grief and loss, trauma associated with a cancer diagnosis, as well as many of the accompanying concerns such as sleep disturbance or fears around treatment, transitioning into survivorship and all the changes that come with that, as well as caregiver stress for those of us who are in a caregiver role, and providing support to family members and friends or anyone who really is impacted by the cancer experience. So in that way, I feel very much aligned with Gilda's, and again, I'm grateful to be working with them to provide that really necessary support. I see both individuals and groups, typically ages 12 and up, so adolescents and adults. We're actually currently running a support group that I wanted to mention for individuals who have lost a spouse to cancer. So if that's something that you feel you would benefit from, or you know someone who may benefit from that experience, please let us know so we can get you some more information about that. I did also want to mention that my services in counseling are covered by insurance, and we are waiving copays for the months of May and June, so it's no cost to you to get mental health support if you feel that's something that would be beneficial for you, which it really is for everybody, especially during this really stressful time. So before I jump directly into the coping strategies that I want to share with you today, I think it's really important to talk about why this health crisis that we're all facing right now it's particularly triggering and particularly difficult for those of us who are either in treatment for cancer or in survivorship. So many of us are really feeling that heightened level of stress and anxiety, that the uncertainty that's in the air today. But those of us facing cancer are really at an increased level of vulnerability to negative emotions during this stressful time. So I want to identify some of the experiences that I've either observed or, experienced myself. And again, talk about why they can be more triggering for our cancer population. So the first major experience that I've both witnessed and experienced myself as a mother, and I know Rob can relate to this as he just talked about his 4 boys, there's a lot of strain on our interpersonal relationships and changes on our roles, the roles that we have in our homes. So you suddenly may have gone from being just a mother and a wife to suddenly having to be a mother, a wife, a teacher, and a cook and a babysitter and everything else full time. And all of these changes can be really overwhelming when you feel like you just want to rest or you just need a break and there's less ability to kind of break away and have moments to ourselves. Whatever changes you may be going through, there's undoubtedly added pressures, added responsibilities, and of course, added proximity to our loved ones that we live with on a daily basis. But thinking of those of us undergoing treatment in particular, it's really difficult to maintain positive lines of communication when you may not be feeling well, you may be fatigued, you may have just had treatment that day and want to rest. And I know I've really witnessed quite a bit of media pressure talking about making the best of this opportunity and making the best of the time you have at home with your children. And a lot of feelings of guilt can be generated by not really wanting to, by needing rest, by not feeling that you're necessarily able to spend as much time with your children as you would like to, or get to know your spouse on a deeper level, and all of these beautiful things that are being advertised. And there are reasons to be grateful for this opportunity in that we do get to spend time with our kids or with our partners, but it can also be really, really stressful. And on top of that, when it's a time where we're supposed to be kind of staying away from everyone, when you have an illness or you're going through cancer and you may be needing an additional amount of support, it can be difficult to ask for that help, ask for that support from your family members when we all have an awareness that stress is higher for all of us. And that can also create some guilt. And that kind of leads me to another experience that I really wanted to talk with you all about. And it's the sense of physical isolation. This isolation can bring up feelings of shame about a cancer diagnosis or having an illness in general. As I said a moment ago, you may need additional support, and reaching out to individuals outside of your home and having them come visit you or having them come to help you with some of the necessary care that you may need can also create a lot of guilt and feeling you don't want to expose them or they don't want to expose you. And it's a really difficult time to reach out for support. It can also kind of trigger some PTSD symptoms from receiving a cancer diagnosis, because while it's a different type of isolation we're experiencing now in terms of being physically separated, when we get that diagnosis, it can be such a traumatic moment that makes us feel alone or isolated from others or different. And again, this physical isolation can really trigger some of those traumatic past experiences. But that leads me to the next point I really wanted to talk to you all about, which is a decreased amount of contact with our loved ones outside of our homes. Now, I really believe that this is probably one of the most impactful aspects of COVID-19 that we're all feeling, particularly because isolation and separation, decreased contact, all of these things can trigger fears of death and dying. So death, some would say, is mankind's greatest fear. But that fear really stems from a fear of losing connection, a fear of not being able to talk with our loved ones, not being able to attend our grandchildren's sporting events or cuddle them, or not being able to go to our cousin's wedding, but also a fear of disconnection, of being alone. So in some ways, our greatest fear is really that loss of connection. And when you face a cancer diagnosis, it's almost like, for some, facing our greatest fear of dying, of being isolated, of being alone. And to add that fear on top of the fear that's being generated by this decreased amount of contact can just be really overwhelming. Feelings of helplessness is another major experience that I think many of us are really facing right now. We may feel unable to care for ourselves or others in the same capacity. And despite, our efforts to stay at a distance, to keep things sanitary, there's really a feeling of there's limits to our control in this situation in terms of how the virus is spread and what we're able to do to keep ourselves safe. But I also think it can really trigger some, again, PTSD-like symptoms, because feelings of helplessness are really generated by receiving that cancer diagnosis. When you receive a cancer diagnosis and you enter treatment, we become a medical number. We're suddenly bombarded with medical terminology that may be vastly outside of our knowledge base, as most of this terminology is based in Greek or Latin. And also suddenly we are almost held captive by a medical system that essentially holds our life in their hands. And again, this experience is different, but that sense of helplessness is the same and can really trigger some of that hurt that we're still holding on to. I think another really important thing that is coming up for me as well is compromises in our ability to practice self-care. And self-care is such an essential aspect of, everyone's life really, but especially for those of us who are in survivorship or who are undergoing treatment. Things like yoga, support groups, workshops, art classes, all of these things, we're suddenly having to adjust the way we approach them. Where before maybe we could have just driven to our art class, now that might not be available to you. Although I will, and Dr. Roy said this earlier, Gilda's has done a fabulous job of really transitioning to online services, and it's really wonderful services they're providing for people, but it's still a difficult transition for all of us. Also things like physical therapy or massage, those kinds of services are really vital for individuals who may be experiencing physical pain, physical discomfort of any kind, and suddenly you may have a physical therapy routine and now we can't have that anymore. It can really cause a lot of difficulties. And as I said, all these sources of relief and support, it's a huge transition to go without them or have to move them to online. The last real experience that I kind of want to identify and talk about is financial stress. As many of you know, there's a real change in the workforce that our nation is experiencing right now, and that can lead to all sorts of financial changes or changes in your budget, in your financial plan, and that alone is an immensely stressful experience. Many people are having to, obtain unemployment or find new means to make a living, and all of those changes can be immensely stressful, which, as Dr. Roy so eloquently explained, stress is really a major risk factor for recurrence and something that we'd like to avoid. But particularly for those of us who are undergoing cancer treatment or who are in survivorship, it can be especially difficult because getting sick is essentially the most expensive thing that can happen to you. And when suddenly your income source has changed, or your money plans have changed because of this pandemic we're all facing, it's like you already had a heightened stress level from medical bills or supplement expenses or any kind of medical expenses, and suddenly there's another layer of stress on top of that. So again, it's a very triggering experience for those of us who are undergoing treatment or who are in survivorship. All of this is even that much more difficult than for the general population. So moving on to the good stuff, I guess, is how do we cope with all of this? What do we do to manage this stress, right? I do have a few strategies that I want to share with you that I really think can help. The first, and it may seem really simple, and this is particularly in my mind for those of us who are parents now at home with our kids, our 4 boys, or 2 boys in my case, all the time: routine. Routine it allows us to feel a sense of control. It allows us to have order in our lives, and it really makes things easier. Routines can create simplicity and a sense of security, and that we know what to expect. Once we have a solid routine in place, it can really balance some of the uncertainty that is really being generated by this experience that is COVID-19. Along with routine, we can also gain a sense of control and accomplishment by setting specific goals for ourselves or specific tasks, things that we want to accomplish or need to accomplish, and trying to go about them in a systematic way that's a part of our routine. It gives us, a sense of control, a sense of accomplishment, and helps to simplify our daily life. So, those of you with kids know boredom is going to strike, or somebody doesn't want to do their homework, and having a system in place helps your children feel less stress, helps you feel less stress, and helps you keep up with the many tasks that you may have to still be doing just now from home. Another really, really important coping strategy, I should say, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm a counselor, but I think counseling is just a really vital source of support, especially for those of us who are undergoing treatment or who are in survivorship. Counseling is an immensely helpful experience for processing emotions, for developing coping strategies that are more specifically catered to you and your needs. It allows you to release mental energy or release emotions and just get general emotional support. And also to, allow you to kind of cultivate a stronger sense of self-awareness. And as I said earlier, as I speak for myself and for Associates of Integrative Medicine, counseling is more or less free. So not only does it alleviate some of the emotional stress that you're experiencing, it can also help not add financial stress to your plate on top of some that you may already have. And this kind of leads to my next coping strategy. And we've touched on this a few times, and you all are doing it right now, but utilizing telehealth and online resources that are available to you. As we have said several times now, Gilda's has done such a fabulous job transitioning to online support, and they have all of these workshops, support groups, activities, things that are designed to support you from the comfort of your home. Just like we're doing this talk today. We're all at home, but it feels like we're all just having a good conversation together, and these services are so vital. But not only Gilda's, things like therapy, myself included, we can do appointments online. Organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous, Codependents Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, just about everybody has really transitioned to a telehealth online support system right now. Outside of that, there are many churches, religious organizations, programs such as those, they provide Bible studies online or, religious services online, sermons, what have you. And it's really, they're all designed, as I said before, to provide you support from the comfort of your home. So it's really only beneficial to you to seek out those resources and utilize them. They're available. But online resources can look like more than just support groups or workshops. They can also be things like YouTube videos or Instagram pages or anything that you find personally encouraging or helpful. For example, I personally, on my personal Instagram, I follow a yoga page, and they post stretches and exercises and things on a daily basis that I find really helpful. Or mental health pages that just post, encouraging quotes or anything that kind of helps lift your mood that's easily accessible to you. But on top of that, YouTube videos are just incredible. They're wild. The full range of anything you could ever hope for is on YouTube, good and bad. But if you've been craving to dive into a do-it-yourself project, but you're not sure where to start, want to get your hands moving and you just don't know, look it up on YouTube. It's just, the possibilities are really endless. But also for some of those physical needs that we have, like I was mentioning before, physical therapy, massage, there's YouTube videos or online guides to help you with things like melt rollers to soothe sore muscles, or different, again, yoga videos, art classes, all sorts of online resources that are, for the most part, free and available to you. Another really important coping mechanism or coping strategy is utilizing meditation or spiritual practices. Meditation allows us to become more grounded and more in touch with the present moment. And that essentially is what grounded means. I think grounding is a term that's thrown about quite a bit, and sometimes it's vaguely used, but really the concept of being grounded is rooting yourself in the present moment to kind of break the cycle of negative thinking or allowing your thoughts to spiral into an anxious space. Being rooted in the present moment and focusing on your physical sensations as you experience them, it can give you an opportunity to really pause and focus on what's really occurring, maybe challenging some of your anxious thoughts. What evidence do I have to support this? Is this really what's going on? And take a more objective stance at what situation you're facing. But as well, spiritual practices and meditation, as I said, they can really help balance some of the negative impacts of COVID-19. They generate a sense of community, a sense of connection, a sense of oneness or unity, and overall a sense of hope. And those things are so vital to us right now when we're forced to be apart from one another. I think oftentimes people get frustrated with the idea of meditation because they feel like they're doing it wrong. And I really want to assure you that there's no wrong way to go about it. It can be as simple as lying in your bed with your eyes closed, focusing on your breath, doing anything to relax your body, and most importantly, knowing that your mind is probably going to wander, as human beings are just sort of designed to do, but that's okay. And if that feels kind of like really challenging or you're not sure about it, there's plenty of apps on your phone or online resources for guided meditations. For example, there's an app called Calm, just C-A-L-M, Calm, and they have just a wide variety of free guided meditations specifically put into different categories based on what you may specifically be going through: stress, anxiety, school problems, relationship problems, all sorts of different, again, categories that are catered to what you're experiencing. So if meditation feels a little overwhelming, that might be a good place to start. So the next one that comes to my mind, I want to give you guys a more specific technique that you can just pull out of your pocket whenever you need it. And for those of you who follow our blog, you might have seen we made a post about this a little while back, but it's super simple, it's easy to remember, and you don't need anything but your body and yourself to do it. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Simple as that. And again, it's based on the idea of grounding I was just mentioning, in that it's designed to help bring you into the present moment, to focus on your body, on your physical senses. So essentially what you do when you're feeling that heightened level of anxiety or particularly stressed or frazzled, bring your attention to your physical body and take note of 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And again, this can allow you a moment of pause to break the cycle of anxious thinking, and it gives you an opportunity to more objectively and calmly approach the next moment.
Jessica, can you repeat it? 5 things you can see?
It's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch or feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 taste, the taste in your mouth. So again, that's a really easy kind of grounding technique that you can use if you're feeling particularly elevated, flooded with emotions, to help bring you back to the present moment.
Why does that work?
Well,
What does that mean? Like, it grounds you? Like, can you tell us a little bit about why that works?
Well, it allows you to focus on what's in your surroundings rather than the anxious thoughts that are going on in your mind. So, for example, when you're anxious about something, you may be anticipating a more negative outcome or anticipating something to be more difficult than maybe it is, or perceive someone as being upset with you when they're not. And when you focus on your physical senses and allow yourself to pause in that moment, you can shift from being in a place of emotional thinking to bring in more logic, more rational thinking. And we call this the wise mind. It's where your emotions and your rational mind meet. And that can allow you to more objectively say, well, I thought this individual was upset with me. I was really anxious about it. But let me take a second. Maybe they're just having a bad day and it's not about me. But again, this grounding technique gives you that opportunity and helps train your mind to take those moments of pause and kind of question your anxious thinking.
It's almost like you're saying it gives you like space in between the reaction you're having and acting on it to lower the cortisol, to circle back, in your system, which allows you to move from this fight or flight to being really present.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You're so articulate.
Oh, so are you.
Thank you. But yeah, again, with the idea of coping strategies, one last thing that I want to touch on, I hope I covered your question, Dr. Roy. I think it's really important to have a sense of self-awareness. And what I mean by that is you have to find what works for you. And as I mentioned earlier, counseling is a really wonderful resource that can help you identify the coping strategies that are most specific to you and your life. And, I tell this to many of my patients. If someone says to me they hate writing, they're adamantly not going to write, then I'm not going to suggest journaling to them, because if it's not their thing, it's not their thing. But at the same time, try to be open to new experiences, because you may think journaling is not going to work for you, and you might give it a try and find, wow, I just had so much to dump out and it was so helpful to just write it out. I never would have expected that. But ultimately, as I said, it's about figuring out what works best for you, and what's going to be most helpful for you in each anxious situation. So I guess, guys, that really covers what my portion of the talk today. I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen. I hope you found some of this information useful. I truly do. And I guess I'll hand it back to Dr. Roy. Is there anything you want to add before we go to the Q&A?
No, I thought that was really good. I think it's such a big topic that we had to be very broad, but what we really want is to kind of hone in now and answer your specific questions. So I want to point out a couple things. At the bottom of the screen, people, and Rebecca, maybe you can help direct people, is a thing that says participants. You might be able to see that. It's right next to chat. And if you click on that or just below it, my IT person is telling me you can raise your hand. I'm not seeing how to do that. Maybe Rebecca, you can jump in here, and if people don't want to chat, we can just unmute you when you raise your hand.
Under reactions, you can raise your hand.
Oh, where is that? Oh, there it is. Okay, under reactions, there it goes. I think you can clap or thumbs up. Should we just, on mine at least, should we ask people to thumbs up if they have a question?
That works perfectly. And I'll try to keep an eye on it too.
Okay, great. So actually, if there could be only one of us doing it, Rebecca, why don't you manage that? So people, where it says reactions on the bottom right, if you click thumbs up, we'll unmute you so you can ask your question, or you can just put it in the chat box on the right. So I want to start answering some of the questions that have come through while Jessica was talking, and we'll just keep going until it looks like it's 7:21. How much time do you think, Christina or Rebecca?
We can go a little over if we have more questions.
So we're maybe 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let's start with a question about Arimidex. So can Arimidex be combined with ginseng? And I'm not going to say your name unless you want to unmute yourself. So just give me a thumbs up if you do want to interact and tell me a little bit more. But some of you may be on what's called endocrine therapy. So endocrine therapy is a type of drug that blocks estrogen in the body. And I'm going to keep circling back and keep circling back. So it blocks estrogen in the body because estrogen makes cells grow. Okay? So very simple. We're going to use the same mechanisms over and over again to talk about stress. When we block estrogen, we're blocking cell growth, right? So it's important to be able to stay on these drugs that block cell growth, because blocking cell growth reduces the amount of cell errors, right? So when we reduce this amount of cell errors, we reduce the risk of cancer. The problems with Arimidex or endocrine therapy in general, is it has a lot of side effects, which I want to emphasize, even though we're not talking about that in this talk, we are able to prevent and treat. But it also can interact with a lot of natural therapies. And the reason why is all endocrine therapy are CYP3A4 inhibitors, which means they use a pathway in the doorway that a lot of natural therapies use, like St. John's wort, ginseng, garlic, curcumin, quercetin, some of the big heavy hitters that you guys know about. So it's important, if we're trying to manage stress, let's say, in someone who's taking Arimidex, that we think about how that stress is coming up. So if the person who asked that question would like to let us know how that stress is showing up in their body, or how that stress is showing up in their life, then we can answer that more specifically. But what I can say with endocrine therapy is some of how the stress comes about is it changes the way we manage mood. So we see a lot of lability, like mood going up and down when we're on endocrine therapy and we're moving into a postmenopausal place. When that happens, it's really important to be taking things like B12, but also estrogen modulators. So studies show that 2 portions of phytoestrogens, I'm going to write that down so that you see this word. Phytoestrogens are plant-based therapies that are not estrogenic, as you may have heard from other people, and do not upregulate estrogen, but instead they even out your body's reaction to estrogen withdrawal. Estrogen is just an umbrella term for 16 chemicals, some of which are cancer-causing and some of which are protective. And phytoestrogens, which are beans, legumes, clover, miso, those shift your estrogen production towards the protective forms and even out the impact of Arimidex. So ginseng, which is a really warming herb and has a lot of interactions with Arimidex, may not be the best choice. Now, if you're taking ginseng for other reasons like fatigue, then you're right on. But in that case, we want to make sure we have a super clean source and we're using a very low dose over a long period of time. So that's a reason to call us or email us or go to aimnatural.com and click on contact us so I can help kind of individualize that and direct you to the right source. Okay? And then we had a question here that I think, Jessica, you may be helpful in answering, and I'm going to bounce back and forth between me and Jessica so your questions won't be answered right in order. And the question that I'm seeing here is, how can I meditate if I have a lot of chaos or stress, small kids at home? What's a strategy to get some peaceful or quiet time when I've got young kids at home or chaos at home?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is touching back on what I spoke to earlier. It's the idea of having a routine in place. And kind of scheduling that almost as an important aspect of the routine that you have. I know it's different for every child, every age group, but perhaps your children take naps in the afternoon. Meditation doesn't have to be a several hour long process. It can be a 10-minute practice that you implement during those already quiet moments that are a part of your routine. Or
even a 1-minute practice, isn't that right?
Absolutely. It can be as short or as long as time allows, and as short or as long as those quiet moments. And I know they're few and far between with young children, but it could also be like first thing in the morning when you wake up, or you set an alarm for 15 minutes before your kids usually wake up. Things like that, where you almost have to, like I said, either utilize the quiet, calm moments that are already a part of your routine or create those specific quiet moments, kind of carve them out where you can.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just saying I can relate. I know that's really challenging with young ones.
And I think also it's important to stress that it doesn't have to be a continuous 5 minutes. It can be 1 minute. Studies have shown that even 1 minute a day will significantly improve your stress levels. And the real question here is managing our stress going to improve our outcomes, right? That's what we all really want to know. And the answer is unequivocally people, yes. Managing our stress will unequivocally improve outcomes. Does that mean that if you're stressed, you're killing yourself? No. It means if you aren't trying to manage chronic stress by making small baby steps to do just one of the things Jessica talked about, for example, maybe just a 1-minute meditation a day, then you're not doing everything you can to empower yourself in that fight for your life. And that's what's really important here, because this world we live in right now is not designed to let us calm and be at peace. The world we're living in right now is designed to keep us on high alert. So one of the things that Jessica didn't manage, but a news fast is really important for all of us right now. It makes no difference to any of us in terms of our diagnosis and prognosis what's going on with COVID in Michigan. It's not going to impact you if you're following the right guidelines for social distancing and being careful with hygiene and avoiding contact with others. And I want to circle back to other questions about that before I go on and on. So great points. Keep posting them here. I'm seeing a ton of questions. We may not get to everybody, but remember to fill out that JOT form we're enclosing in the chat, and we'll reach out to you afterwards with answers if you tell us we can. So, and again, we do not sell your information or use it for any other purpose than to answer your questions. Somebody asked if homocysteine supreme is appropriate for a breast cancer survivor because it has a ton of B vitamins in it. So first of all, I want to emphasize that everything is individual, and taking combination formulas can be dangerous for those of us who are struggling with survivorship or with a cancer diagnosis. Homocysteine supreme, without being specific to that person, is just a combination B vitamin that also contains NAC or N-acetylcysteine in it. And no, it's not appropriate for someone who's in survivorship if, one, their homocysteine levels are good, meaning below 11, 2, they're not folate deficient, and 3, they don't have a lot of cardio factors other than exposure to cardiotoxic therapy. So this is a high-level question, but I think I'm speaking to a high-level audience member. So I just want to remind you to come in and see me. It's not appropriate for you under the circumstances. But the real point for everybody is combination formulas are not necessarily the best choice to manage stress. And I think another question here that would be appropriate for Jessica maybe is, what about music that helps you to decrease stress?
Music is a phenomenal resource. Absolutely. Again, in touching on my last point, I think it's really important to find what works for you. And there are many of us that thrive off of listening to music, off of incorporating music into our routines, whether it's an exercise routine or a meditation routine. If you listen to certain music and you find it brings your stress level down, then I absolutely would encourage that. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier YouTube, so I would ask people to look at binaural beats. So binaural beats are rhythmic beats in music that help to induce biorhythms in your brain to manage anxiety and panic. And then I posted a resource before called healthjourneys.com. I'm going to post it again. And those are guided visualizations that involve music to lower stress levels. But any music that has a binaural beat to it will induce biorhythms in your brain to calm that cortisol and bring it down.
And can I say something to that?
Sure.
Just real quick. I'm a talker, but music, like outside of my family, means the world to me. I'm staring at my wall of 6,000 CDs right now that I just got done finally alphabetizing. But anyways, music, I can't explain enough how much that got me through everything. and still does to this day. And what did it before? I mean, it's amazing what music does. So
that's 100% true, Rob. And I'm going to mute you for just a second, just to say that I think Rob is pointing out a point that we may not think of these things as being therapeutic, but in fact, there's a whole facet or branch of therapy that looks at music as a therapeutic source. And Jessica didn't mention this, but I'm going to mention it for her. She actually started out as an art and music teacher, and moved into therapy because of her work with children in art and music and the therapeutic impact that it had in calming people down in terms of stress and anxiety. So that's something that she can individualize for you. And again, therapy is covered by your insurance and it's no cost to you. Coming back though to Rob's question earlier about nutrition and exercise. So again, I'm going to circle back. I'm going to keep bringing you guys back to the initial points that we made. When we're talking about nutrition and exercise, what are we talking about when we're talking about stress? We're talking about lowering inflammation in the system, and we're talking about lowering or modulating sugar in the system. Why would that be? Does anybody remember? When we are stressed, we release cortisol, which tells the liver to dump sugar. Sugar increases inflammation in the system. Inflammation drives cell growth. Cell growth increases the rate of cell errors, and that's what perpetuates or triggers cancer. So when we're thinking about nutrition, exercise, we're thinking about things that lower inflammation and help us modulate sugar. So let's talk first about nutrition. So in terms of nutrition, things that are anti-inflammatory are fatty fish, green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds. These things all contain omega-3s, and omega-3s compete with those pro-inflammatory messengers that we talked about that are alarm signals that are going off in your body. They block those alarm signals and turn the volume down. So as much as I want to go to McDonald's when I'm stressed, it actually will almost immediately ratchet up your stress level, even though it feels good in the moment. But if I can force myself to mimic that McDonald's a bit, and let's say instead have a tuna fish sandwich on whole wheat bread with carrots or veggie chips instead of French fries, and maybe kombucha or sparkling water or a La Croix instead of Diet Coke or Coke, what will happen is I'll actually lower inflammation in my body almost immediately, which will help me in establishing habits to fight cancer. The second thing I want to talk about in modulating sugar is maintaining our protein and eating a little bit all day long. So grazing is an excellent strategy for managing stress and making sure that what you're grazing on is high in protein. What that does is even out the impact that cortisol has on your sugar. Okay? I'm going to switch over to a question for Jessica, and then we'll come back to questions about exercise. Jessica, how can I keep my child occupied and understanding patience? I don't know if that's a question for you, but
yeah, I think that's the mom in me is going to come out to answer that one more than the counselor aspect of me. But again, I think really trying to have a routine in place. I keep coming back to that. But on top of that, there are so many resources online, things like Pinterest, that you can just look up simple activities for children. And I mean, we've all experienced that where the little kid gets a present and they're more excited about the box that they turn into a fort. Like, you can use so many simple everyday items that you have at home to create really engaging activities for kids. Even simple things like, we're going to go outside and spray each other with the hose because it's really hot today. Enough to get them moving, get them active, get them using their hands or engaged in something, and really kind of planning those types of activities, having them sort of in your toolkit to implement in that routine is a really helpful way to, they'll know what to expect. This is a time I'm going to have an activity, and also allow you to have a sense of not being suddenly surprised with, hey, I need to have something for my child to do.
Good. I think those are all great suggestions. And we have another question that I want to circle back to, and that was the exercise piece. So again, how can we lower inflammation in the body and modulate sugar using exercise? So in fact, the data shows us that 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week that is breathless, meaning you're breathing, while you're doing it, is conclusively has the strongest data associated with lowering risk of recurrence. So that's 150 minutes total, and it can be broken up throughout the week. But in terms of lowering stress, something that Jessica talked about a lot that I think we underestimate is yoga. Yoga actually comes from Hinduism. It's a branch of thinking about your body as being a vessel and your soul as being the driver. And it asks you to get really present, to focus on your breath, and really just to stretch and hold a stretch. But when we do this yoga, and we can look at, like Jessica said, YouTube, we can look at apps on our phone, we can just Google yoga postures. When we do yoga, what we're doing is we're exercising in a way that asks our nervous system to switch over from that fight or flight into a calmer state. So yoga is really excellent. Another thing that's really important for lowering stress is walking. If we are walking, it needs to be 50 minutes, 4 days a week. If that's our only exercise, and slowly and surely, doesn't have to be fast, but really make sure that we're watching for falls and we're careful about how we're ambulating. So I think we're coming up on time, and we've run really far, and a lot of you have hung in there. I want to just say one thing before we close. So I think talking to someone like me or Jessica in this setting, it's hard, and I see a lot of you are already patients, so some of you I'm just preaching to the choir, but it's hard to understand how what we do is meaningful. So I want to make it tangible to you. When you come in to see one of us, whether it's me or Dr. March, we sit with you for an hour and a half to an hour, and we look at your history from when you were a child to now, what happened with diagnosis, how you manage stress, how you eat, how you sleep, everything in your pathology report, everything in your imaging, and we go over all of it with you. In that visit, we use a whiteboard to map out how you got to this place and what our algorithm for care is going to be, which is specific for each of you. So that's going to be a different pathway for each person. Then we write treatment. We send you for labs, which is covered by your insurance. We look at your liver, lungs, and kidneys. We look at your immune system. We look at how you use nutrition. We look at stress. So we look at how your body manages stress, and we look at how stress is impacting inflammation in your body. We come back together. We go over that step by step. We talk about how that's working in your body, and we design a treatment plan. Part of that treatment plan may be to meet with Jessica or somebody like Jessica to work through the pieces that we need to put in place to either process trauma associated with diagnosis or enhance our positivity and our optimism so that we can truly harness some of this data and fight cancer effectively. which is, of course, covered by your insurance. We beat 3 to 4 months later and see what got better, what stayed the same, what got worse. I would say 99% of people get better. So we appreciate this time with you. We're glad we got a chance to talk to you. We want you to reach out to us and ask us if you have any other questions. As always, and I'm going to let Jessica close last, but I will say it is an honor to work in this field. It's an honor to work with you. You keep me humble. You keep me grounded. You keep me present. My life is worth living because of the work that I do. So I thank you for letting me be a part of your journey. Jessica,
thank you. Yeah, I'd like to kind of second that sentiment. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to have spoken with all of you and shared some of my knowledge. I really do hope that it's been helpful. And I do really want to highlight that, as Dr. Roy mentioned, whether it's with me or another counselor, therapy is such a vital resource. And one of the most important aspects of that is building a trusting relationship with whoever it is you choose to see. And my goal as a clinician is to really create a safe environment where you feel comfortable processing or experiencing, talking about the full range of the human experience, any emotion, be it positive, negative, painful, wonderful, and really creating that safe environment where you don't feel judged in any way. And that's the kind of environment where you can really process some of your stress and individually learn to manage it in a healthier way, as we learned today is so vital. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your time and your evening with us. And I really look forward to meeting as many of you as I possibly can in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy and Jessica.
Thank you.
Uplifting and encouraging. And thank you so very much for giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This is wonderful.
Yep. Good night, folks.
Okay, good night.